All righty. Well, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's AMS webinar. It's Tomorrow's Weather, AMS Presidents' Perspectives on the Challenges and Opportunities Facing the Weather Enterprise. We're incredibly fortunate to have with us four AMS Past Presidents. We have Rich Clark, Brad Coleman, Mary Glacken, and Louis Uccellini, along with our moderator, Doug Hildebrand, for a timely and, yes, very important discussion. Now, a quick note before we dive in, though, folks. If you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A option. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. We won't be monitoring the chat, so any questions that you have for our panel, please make sure that that's addressed through the Q&A. We will have time at the end of the session to address as many of those questions as we can. And now, without further ado, I'm happy to hand things over to today's moderator, Doug Hildebrand. Doug is co-founder of 214 Consulting, an LLC working to advance the weather, water, and climate enterprise. Prior to that, Doug spent 23 years at NOAA's National Weather Service, serving in various positions, including communications, S&T, operations, NOAA Policy Office, and most recently in the Office of Water Prediction. Doug also remains active in AMS, having served as past commissioner and chair of the AMS Weather Band. And with that said, Doug, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gideon, and thank you everyone for joining us today and this evening. Looks like a great crowd out there. And I want to thank our panelists, dare I say, the Mount Rushmore of AMS presidency. I know there are other presidents probably thinking,
Well,
maybe not, but maybe. A very good argument for the four of you. So it's a real honor and pleasure to be joining you all. I wanted to start this great conversation by recognizing something that is obvious, but it's also very important, and that is emotion. Many of you, over the last 6 days, most of us, all of us are feeling emotion with the tragedy in Central Texas, as well as other locations like New Mexico, the awe-inspiring, Mother Nature really hitting us hard at the heart, and also emotion over the last 6 months. And I'm kind of singling emotion out because we're not all robots, at least not yet. And my challenge to us all is to use that emotion for good and not something that's negative. And so, sort of with that as a backdrop to this conversation and future conversations, as we try to navigate the unsettled waters, really, take that to heart in how you treat others, how you make comments, whether it's, in this forum or social media or traditional media, that we all are sort of, trying to put our arms around all of this. So with that, we're going to start with Mary Glacken. Mary, what are your main thoughts, sort of what you want to get points across right off the bat?
Okay, so thanks so much, Doug. I want to start by kind of thanking people for joining us tonight. I do think it's a time where it is good to come together as a community. And I personally am looking forward to questions from the audience. So I'm going to keep my introductory comments brief. But there's a few points that I would like to say. First, I think, is really to recognize what this community has done over decades. I think we provide a service today that's pretty incredible out there. And it's a service that's delivered really enabled by the full enterprise. It's not just the federal sector, it's the private sector, it's the academic sector, and it's starting to be part of the nonprofit sector as well. So I think, I'm often quoted as saying that, when I joined the Weather Service in the late 70s, it was not hard to find us on the comic page. But we are clearly in the front of the Wall Street Journal these days. And as we've seen with this tragedy in Texas, our work is kind of more important than ever. So I want to start with a big thank you for everybody in this enterprise, because I think, we should be applauded for what we have done. I think a part of that I really want to underscore, and I'm saying this from my background with IBM and all, is we have a private weather sector in this country, which is the envy of the world. We're able to compete globally in a number of places, and in fact, a lot of places globally around the world. So I think that's been enabled by really the federal sector and the policies associated with that, in particular, the free and open sharing of data. So it's a reminder that there's a lot on the line here. As we've seen since January, pretty dramatic changes in the federal sector. And I think those federal sector changes are going to come and impact what the abilities are across the whole enterprise. I also think that because of the changes that we've seen, it's going to be really hard to recover ourselves back to the point of where we were. A number of us have been saying in kind of an offhand way, but very seriously, I don't think we should be building Humpty Dumpty the same way again. So I think that it's really going to call on all of us to think about what are the best ideas and how to come forward with them. I am chairing an advisory group now through AMS about the future of the enterprise. And we do intend to deliver reports to this administration. We're working on one of them right now, and we expect to work on a series of them on a number of issues going forward. And then my final point is, I suspect there's students and others on this call that are really concerned about their future. And I think one reason I kind of take heart about the future is our services and science are so vital. You just can't ignore it. We can't ignore what happened in Texas. And unfortunately, we're going to see more of these extreme events. So one way or another, I think there's going to be a place for people in the future. And it's incumbent on us to really work together to figure out how we're going to be able to move forward if some of the worst things that are proposed do in fact come to pass. Thanks, Doug.
Wonderful, and it's great to bring in the student perspective and their challenges going ahead. And so hopefully we'll have time to return to a deeper conversation on that. I do now want to pass on the microphone to Rich Clark, longtime academic and a great perspective from the research and the academic perspective there. Rich.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it, and welcome everyone, and thank you for attending. So I was elected president 2022 from the academic sector, and I've spent over 35 years in the academic sector, teaching and doing research, and I wanted to focus on that somewhat. And certainly the impacts of the federal funding cuts on student attitudes and enrollments in meteorology programs, and what we need to do to adapt, because as Mary said, this Humpty Dumpty is not going to be put back in the same way. So, there's been these budget cuts at NOAA, National Weather Service, FEMA, NSF, and related agencies, and there's a trimming of the workforce and research support. And these reductions can undermine the perceived stability and the attractiveness of careers in our fields. And so I was wondering, thinking about this and how this is going to shape student attitudes and enrollment trends and the effects on student attitudes and their motivation. There's perceived career uncertainty, hiring freezes and layoffs, and undergraduates begin to question the viability of public sector careers. There's an erosion of research opportunities, cancellation of internships and summer fellowships at NOAA and related agencies, and reduced hands-on exposure. There's a shift towards more stable fields, possibly, as students consider alternative STEM disciplines. not all of these are bad now. I mean, none of them are bad, but some of them are related. Data science, computer engineering, things like that, clear private sector pathways. And one of the things that affects us directly as a society is a decline in professional society engagement. It does seem to be a drop off in student attendance at student chapters and regional meetings. So, and enrollment trend observations, undergraduate programs are seeing a decline over the last two admission cycles, as reported by some of the leading meteorological departments. And but this is, there's been a slow, sustained growth up until then, and this, it's multivariate, so you can't just attribute this to federal funding cuts or the attitudes of students associated with those, because it's more complicated than that. And I'll just leave that there for the moment. There's deferrals of students coming in. There's institutions that are at risk. And so what are we going to do? I mean, we can't sit on our laurels. I mean, there's been things that many of the institutions of higher learning have been doing for quite some time now. For instance, integrating data science and computational skills to build out students' skill sets. Interdisciplinary capstone projects in partnership with private weather firms would be really a good idea. And there's been some work coming out of the Mind the Gap efforts that along those lines. Expand science communication and policy tracks. I mean, there's science writing, there's public outreach, there's policy analysis. It's not going to be the meteorology of 25 years ago. It's a new world, and we have to seize the opportunity. There's to emphasize climate resilience and applications, emergency planning, decision support. Those kinds of things are going to be sort of the next wave, and they're already here. And many of us are already doing these things, but now there's a new urgency. Fostering private sector partnerships, offering these online micro credentials. There's a real increase in the number of certificate programs that are available. Maintaining strong federal fellowship support, advocating for university administered fellowships through endowments and whatnot. So I just will sort of wrap it up for now by saying that, we may see some chilled student enthusiasm, but we have to be proactive. In the academic community, we have to have curricular reforms. And I will say they're a long time coming anyway. If you haven't been involved in curricular reforms, now's the time to do it. So I'll stop there and look forward to further discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. And, I think a clear message to the students who are joining us in this webinar is that you're not alone. Don't feel like you're on an island as you look to start your career, that there are a lot of resources. There's mentorships, there's AMS, there's your local chapters. Get proactive in engaging others who can help you. We're going to shift a little bit from the steamy East Coast there to the cool breeze of the Pacific Northwest and Brad Coleman. Brad.
That must mean I'm up. Okay. Thank you, Doug. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. A big fan of getting together and talking. It seems to always bring people closer together and sharing of ideas. So thank you. And again, I look forward to spending this hour with each of you. In these few minutes, I'm going to briefly mention a couple chapters in my career to offer a little bit of context and encouragement for today's discussion. The first chapter was when I was in operational public weather forecasting. Nearly 40 years of my career were at NOAA and the National Weather Service. And, looking back then, to be honest, the weather forecasts weren't very good. They were, as Mary said, they were often comics. I was going to use brunt end of the joke than really informing some kind of a decision. The 2 to 3 day weather forecast then was about as accurate as our 10-day forecast is today. It really is remarkable what we've done as a community. And you can't say what's really accounted for this. How have we made that progress? And it's come from decades of investment into research, technology, continuous improvement of the Weather Service's operational forecasting system. And it really reflects a critical value chain that we've supported through the enterprise, the academic contributions, the workforce, the education, the public sector, and private industry, and building it together. And we do have much to be proud of. The other thing, through my career with NOAA, as the forecast got better, it became more and more clear that there was a growing gap between the value and accuracy of those weather forecasts and what was being used and realized by the stakeholders. As as the forecast got better, the gap grew and grew, and we're not getting it out there. We're not getting the right information out there. And the Weather Service recognized this, and they began to shift and recognize that communication was really becoming as important to the forecast, life and property, as the forecast itself. So the Weather Service shifted to decision support services and communication. And this requires boots on the ground, people in the field offices working and collaborating through the warning and coordination meteorologists, embedding in emergency operations centers, working together to make sure that we derive that full value. This last week, sadly in Texas, I think even in the face of an excellent forecast, tragedy can happen if the information and that recognized threat do not get communicated to the right people in the right amount of time. In addition to the accurate forecast, a true forecast success story has to depend upon investments in local representation, relationships, and communication. We can't lose sight of this critical role in human weather forecasting and need to advocate. We as a community need to advocate for this continued support of Weather Service personnel in these roles. And it's, we're down in staffing. We had a lot of people leave for, the fork in the road and early outs, but we've got to fight and advocate for making sure those positions get filled. And it's critical to our success, our enterprise's success. The second chapter I'm going to touch on is private industry. After I left NOAA, I went over to the private sector, worked a little bit at Microsoft, in the Climate then I went over to the Climate Corporation, and finally ending there with Bayer in Germany, where our weather team provided global weather information to the rest of our company to produce seed and grow crops. We often, the first thing would, what is out there that NOAA provides that we can use as a starting point, and then we would often add value and customize those data to meet our needs. To be honest, they're big companies. And if NOAA weren't there, we would have had the resources to have done it in-house. But that's not true for so many in private industry, startups, early companies that really don't have those resources. And NOAA has been the foundation and really has given access to open data, open and free access to data that has enabled today's weather enterprise to be what it is. They've supported a $15 billion weather industry as a result of what NOAA has done with foundational support and partnerships. So again, we must ensure that decision makers understand that the Weather Service and NOAA are enablers and supporters of the weather enterprise, and they're not a competitor to it. And finally, just in transition to our discussion, I want to acknowledge that disruption can be productive and result in positive change. Today, we certainly find ourselves in such a period. Our challenge today, and as we'll talk about over this remaining time here, and moving forward, is to figure out how we work together to steer the future of our weather enterprise toward another productive chapter. We'll need to leverage technology and science to fill the gaps, and we'll need to extend our capabilities in ways that maybe we haven't thought of before. We will need to be innovative, and we will need to be effective at making our case for the future. Thanks. I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Brad, and a great segue. A lot of your description of sort of the birth of Weather Ready Nation, Louis, 12 years ago, if you can believe that. So transitioning to our final intro remarks from Louis Uccellini. Louis.
So thanks, Doug, and thanks to the previous three speakers. I mean, really does tee up what I wanted to say, actually. It makes it a bit more easier. I want to talk about the Texas tragedy. I join all of you through the entire water, weather, climate enterprise who are shaken to the core by this tragedy. And we were in a similar spot in 2011 in a severe weather season where hundreds of people were killed. And that was one of the motivations for Weather Ready Nation. And I thank those of you who have spoken out in support of the National Weather Service. I know the people there are, like Doug said, there's a lot of emotion with what's gone on over the past several months. There's a but here, though. There's a but. And let me just go through, how I tee this up. The White House put out a statement after several days about the timely and accurate forecast for Texas proved that the National Weather Service is fully capable of carrying out its critical mission. And I saw that kind of message from a number of people in our enterprise who have a lot of experience in this and came to the same conclusion as part of their standing up for the National Weather Service. So it is true for the provision of observations, forecasts, and warnings that worked. But there's another thing in the mission statement of the National Weather Service. After that provision of warnings, it's the provision of impact-based decision support services for the protection of life and property. Now, the National Weather Service statement really emphasized that the workforce remains committed to our mission to serve the American public through our forecast and decision support services. Okay, that's an important add here that I think people need to understand what that means and why didn't that work. So the bottom line for me is we obviously, for this case, need a national assessment of what happened, but something didn't work. Okay, so the success of IDSS is based on a trusted partnership with the emergency management community at every government level. Right? It is developed over a period of time, months, years, that trusted partnership, because these folks are making decisions like for hurricane at landfall, 7 days before landfall, they have to start working towards evacuation. They better trust the people who's given them a forecast they know has a lot of uncertainty in it. Right? It takes practice. The practice sessions are incredibly important to this, and a constant collaborative communication. Now, when it works, it's a beautiful thing to see. Federal, state, local emergency managers working together, pre-positioning assets days in advance, not reacting 2 hours after the event. Okay. So that's what happened this time. It didn't work. Now, that's not pointing fingers. The other thing about a trusted partnership is you don't point fingers. And even when things work well, the emergency management and the forecast, and it's not just the Weather Service, by the way. This is impacting the entire enterprise again. The entire enterprise is involved in this. It's a collaboration that goes on because emergency managers, they'll tell you the first thing they need is consistency, not a whole bunch of forecasts all over the place. They can't make decisions based on that. All right. So there's this collaborative thread, this is a collaborative effort within the enterprise and a collaborative effort between the enterprise and the emergency management. So there are problems. And I would contend for this case, there are problems on both sides. All right. So the WCMs in the two offices are not there. There aren't that many positions that are not filled, but those are two of them. So why is that important? They organize, they help, they're part of that organization, the practice. They're out there. working with these locals. I don't know what the impact of not having them, and I don't have any inside information here. But I do know in past cases, like the tornado cases that ripped Moore, Oklahoma several times with Cat 5s after several years, WCM was all over the place between the first and second one. Hospitals, emergency management centers. What are your plans? What do we have to do? Right? And that was, for the hospital, that was particularly important because they evacuated patients before that one tornado 5 hit the hospital. Okay, so anyway, so when it doesn't work, people have to get together and figure out what went wrong. And from a weather service perspective, what I worry about is WCMs not being there and no local travel. Remember, the credit cards were knocked down to $0 or $1 or something like that, and all travel is canceled. When I went around the weather service offices in 2013, 14, and 15, one of the biggest complaints was they didn't even have the local travel to go to the emergency management tabletop exercises. Right? So that's why I bring it up. And you look on the other side, emergency manager was trying to get plans through. And for whatever reason, everybody's got priorities. They didn't get through. No money. Right? And the emergency management community is getting blasted around in this restructuring in the federal government and what grants go out or don't go out. So we got both sides that need our support. But we have to, if we want the right solution, we have to keep in mind as it's not just physical science, it's social science. It's addressing risk assessments. It's that kind of training that's needed to provide the right information at the right time. And that people, you don't have to hunt down with phone calls from the weather office. You can get calls from the emergency management during the event. All right. So that's what I'm worried about. I think there was issues on both sides that need to be looked at, and it's reflective of the stress factor that we're all under at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Some really great thoughts there. Before switching gears, I do want to offer up to Brad, Mary, Rich, any thoughts based on Louis' comments on the Texas flooding while we're on it there? Does anyone want to jump in with anything to add or a different angle?
No, I think Louis said it well. And I would love to see, a national assessment on this, not just a National Weather Service assessment on it, because that's what needs to happen. I mean, clearly, if there had been sirens there, that it could have been automatically, all sorts. We've all read it. Thank you.
Yeah, Brad.
I just want to add, and it came through, there's been a lot of talk about efficiency over the last few months. And it seems that this is, when you're talking about protection of life and property, we shouldn't be talking about efficiency as much as redundancy. And it's important. Redundancy is how do we manage risk? And how do we ensure that we don't have single points of failure? And the way the Weather Service is, we have backup systems in the Weather Service. We have offices that back up other offices. And that redundancy can protect lives and has protected lives and ensures that the general public gets the best service possible. Unfortunately, and a concern I have is that because of the way it's built, so that you have these backups, you have systems that can work when something goes down. If an office goes down, you can back it up, or numeric weather prediction centers can back up, it's other offices and different backup computers, is that the risk it's not understandable or visible to the outside person about what's happening, or whether you're on a backup system. That's good, but it's also bad because it looks like everything's working fine. And a concern is you get rid of some of these layers of protection and redundancy, you increase that risk, and it's somewhat insidious. And then as you have more storms, your staff get tired because you're understaffed. So we really have to put efficiency aside for operational weather prediction, protection of life and property, and make sure we manage risk properly.
Thanks, Brad. All right. Thank you all for those comments. I do want to switch gears to another light topic, artificial intelligence. And, I'm old enough to remember the mid 90s where, surfing the internet was a term. And, I don't think anybody back in the mid 90s could have thought how the internet was going to just pervade all of all of life and all of society. And I think we're at that point with AI where whether you know a little bit about it right now or a lot about it, I don't know if anyone truly has a complete understanding of where all of this is going to take us, but there's no going back. So Mary, I want to start with you on your thoughts connecting AI with the last 6 months, the budget issues and the workforce. How can AI, one, how can it help? And two, what are any pitfalls or concerns or cautious tales that you might have?
I don't view myself as any expert on this, but I think one of the issues that we have right now is people thinking very simplistically that it's going to take care of our problems, that it's going to take care of kind of the Texas floods. And I think, Louis just pointed out for us so well, a lot of this stuff is relationships and trust and, communication pathways. And having said that, I think we all recognize that AI has a big role to play all through the value chain. Certainly in observing and modeling, we're seeing that happen now. And, I think it's going to help in other ways as well. While we have all these threats to the federal resources here, I just worry, though, that it's going to be taken as this is going to be the panacea for all of our problems. And I really don't see that. And I want to make it clear, I'm not advocating for a status quo of where NOAA or the National Weather Service was before. I do think there are changes that could be quite helpful in moving forward and doing a better job transferring research into operations. Some of us have worked 40 years on that one. But I don't think it's going to be simple solutions like AI that make that. And again, I don't want to underestimate its impact. But of the problems that are facing us right now, I just don't think that's the solution. Thank you.
So double down where it can help, and then, be conservative on the going too far with it. Brad, Louis, or Rich, I'll open it up. Does anyone have
Sure.
other thoughts? Yeah.
Take a quick stab at it. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's certainly impressed with how rapidly we've seen progress in the area. But I think what it really calls attention to, and as we step back and look, and we talked about the last decades, we've done well and been successful because we've invested in innovation and research and ideas. And this is a new one. And that's why it's so critical that we have that, the technical readiness process of bringing early ideas and early concepts, test drive them, figure them out. And that's why, I don't know, we certainly don't know exactly where we're going to end up on NOAA research, but it's a concern there that we need them there. We need that research. We need that pipeline of ideas and testing and evaluating to get it into production. And, the impact of that, if we lose that, would be critical as we look ahead over these next few years, because we rely upon that constant, progression of ideas through testing, evaluation into operations.
Rich.
Yeah, I would just add to that AI has a lot of potential. It can improve the responsiveness of forecasting, but as so many technologies are, they tend to be most effective if they support human roles rather than supplant them. Even as artificial intelligence increases automation, humans will still remain a vital part of the forecast process. And automated forecasts can excel in routine cases, but they can struggle with novel and extreme events, and they'll get smarter in time. Um, you know, forecasters are trained to recognize when a model's output is physically inconsistent, see hallucinations if they're not carefully checked. So human oversight is essential to catch these errors and to ensure that the science is accurate. From an educational point of view, it's as you said earlier, Doug, it's here. It's not going to away. It's not going away. So I think it's really critical that we change our paradigm as to how we envision student learning. I think it has to be recognizing that the students are going to use AI, and it's on us as educators to show them that there's more to it than that. It's not just submitting a prompt and waiting for some output. It's critiquing the output. It's showing them how it can be useful and so on. But I think that there's ways of going about it. And I think that there's a real need these days for a significant rethink of how we teach. And we've heard this for hundreds of years now. People have said this at major junctures in science and technology and education. But AI is different. I would argue that AI is intrinsically different because it's smart, because it's capable of doing something that humans have relied on themselves for doing for hundreds of years. So I do think that there is a significant need for paradigm change in how students will learn using AI, and how do we make it more trustworthy? How do we make it more reliable? How do we train it to do the right things? All of that is
Yeah,
important.
no, great point, Rich. And I would say that one, it's kind of already happening, and we can either be part of the solution or just let the momentum hit us. So I think it's always a better policy to be part of where everything is going. Louis, I know you had your
Yeah, one just
microphone on.
really quick. I know we're getting near here. If you look at the observation systems, you look at the models, there is so much information. It's overwhelming. 85, I don't know, 80 something members of an ensemble. You're going to look at every bit of it, right? So how do you extract the useful information out of satellite data for models, even the data assimilation effort, the use of the models for whatever, the analog technique reborn? I'm sure people have already referring back to previous cases of what happened in Texas, right? Why isn't that? Did that happen in real time? I don't know. Maybe it did. I mean, in certain terms of extracting. Hey, when this case happened in the '80s and the other. I mean, you start seeing patterns. You might start reacting differently. But I think it's still in the assist mode for people who have to communicate and interact with decision makers, because they still want to look in your eyes when you're telling them something's going to happen, that they got to make a decision 3 days in advance to evacuate a whole area. So, but this, I see the use of it, and it's pretty remarkable, I think, of what it can do to help and assist. I should just note, when numerical models were introduced, they were going to replace forecasters. Weather Service had memos already for the LFM, follow the LFM, don't deviate from the LFM. Brad's smiling. I saw that in MOD. And Watson for IBM, the case of going to the Cleveland Medical Clinic, the doctors didn't want to deal with it because they thought they were going to be replaced by Watson. But when the experiment was over, they didn't want Watson to leave because it was assisting them. It was giving them insights that they hadn't thought about for diagnosis. It's just that assistance aspect is going to be around for a while as all these new advancements are made. That's what I think.
Thanks, Louis. And I actually want to stick with you for the moment. We've had some really good questions come in. A handful of them are internationally related. We've got Canada represented here in the webinar. There's concerns about international data sharing in sort of this new paradigm. I'm looking at you as to what your thoughts on in the global context of 2025.
Well, I know Mary also had experience at the WMO. I had experience at the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. The thing that sort of gravitated in my mind as I got more and more experience in working with our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the south, you can't make a forecast even one day out without international cooperation and exchange of data. You certainly can't make forecasts 2, 3, 4, 5 days out. Remember, our service area goes all the way out to the West Pacific. You need a global observing system to make a local forecast. You need, the meteorological community has a rich history of working with the international community on big science projects. FIGI, the GARP program, and FIGI is what introduced global modeling to the whole world at about the same time. Global models weren't running operationally until after the FIGI results, which proved you could actually get the data in real time to run global models. All right, so that partnership, I worry for that too. I mean, it's incredibly important for us advancing what we want to do. And with respect to the private sector, that's Mary is right. I mean, when she opened this about the private sector, it's the envy of the world. The U.S. private sector in this enterprise is the envy of the world. And, it used to, as I went over to WMO meetings, we bring private sector people with us. And the point is that there's business out there, but this data exchange, we were predicated at we were distributing more data than what we were getting. I don't think that's going to be the case in the future. We're falling behind in the satellite arena. There's going to be more data coming in from the outside. And if we go into commercial buys, I'm not sure how much of a bargain that's, people think it's going to be. So, however we proceed on the commercial buy, we should continue the discussions that we had pre-COVID and during the COVID. I've lost track of it. Maybe it's still ongoing right now. But this was a matter for discussion within the entire international community and to the neighbors up north. Canada, I really enjoyed working with you while I was there. We were really true partners. And I can tell you one of the things that came out of that for the people in the audience here, when we do the extra radiosondes for the, improve the hurricane track, at least stabilize it as it's coming to the United States, Canada jumps in and provides along that, gets the northern stream for us, which is a very important part of whether it's going to recurve or not. That's how this international cooperation has transpired. It's not just planning and research and all that. It's now in the operational world in ways that are really meaningful to us. So I think this has to be part of our discussion as we move forward.
Yes, Mary.
So I want to take this the step further. So I agree, 3,000% with Louis, but what needs to happen is we need to be educating decision makers on these topics. So, there's one question in the thing about, what can you do beyond, contacting your congressman or senator? If you haven't been doing that, by the way, you should be. And, even stopping by local offices and talking to staffers there and taking some time to educate. Another thing I would put on your list is op-eds in local papers. The New York Times is one thing, but I early on wrote an op-ed for the Jacksonville Local Times Union and got a lot of feedback on that. So, people don't, most voters, I don't think really trust the Times and the big name things. They trust, more local sources. So there's probably opportunities there for some of you to be on local NPR stations and things like that. But we've got to educate, we've got to educate, we've got to educate about what's on the line here and why some of the proposed changes don't make any sense. And on the other hand, we need to be in a position to kind of offer some good ideas of how to move forward here. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that's an excellent point on that, Mary. And Louis, thank you on the international side. And I will say, and I knew this was going to happen, it's going to be the fastest hour on any kind of webinar. So for those that submit a question and we do not get to it, you'll have my promise here that we will respond collectively to all of these questions. So I want to thank you for engaging with us. I want to get back to a very important point, which is, Mary, you talked about the assumption about AI sort of not being the catch-all solution for the future. But there's also a thought out there that whatever the government doesn't do through the cuts and whatnot, that it's just sort of by magic, it's going to happen in the private sector and academia. And so I want to get that perspective of, what needs to happen, or what does the weather industry sector, what does academia need to be in a better position at those opportunities of picking something up that has been cut, that type of thing, because it just doesn't happen automatically.
Yeah, I'll jump in for a moment here real quickly. When I've been interviewed in the press, and I've been doing a fair amount of press for months now, one of the things I say is it's hard for me to imagine private sector picking up some of these real big things like observing and modeling without us as a nation creating a monopoly. And I really worry about that. But on the other hand, I've been frustrated for years because we lack mechanisms for public-private partnerships. We know, to take your point about AI, Doug, that the private sector is well ahead of where NOAA is now. And to the point where even if we were in normal budget cycles, I'm not sure they could catch up. So what could we imagine that might bring, a public-private partnership together, which meets the needs of the private sector who are looking for a profit and a competitive edge, but remains true to the public service concept and not leaving the least behind on us, one of the things that NOAA does so well now is not just speak to people with, advanced cell phones, but really reaching them in other ways. So what might some of those partnerships look like? I think, this is the kind of time where we actually might get something like that, that I think would benefit us.
Louis, Brad, Rich, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on Mary's thing about the monopoly aspect. We've seen countries where the Central Weather Service itself has been privatized, the whole shebang. If there was the rest of a private sector, it dries up, and other private sector folks can't get in for their business. And I'm not sure how much money these countries make, but some of them have gone back to where they were, right? So the point is, and just one other example of the envy for how we make it work here. When I was at WMO meetings, people would come up and say, "How do you make it work?" I went to the international a meeting of societies, and that was what we talked about, how we made it work here. And a lot of rough edges, a lot of battles, and then the weather, the 2003 Fair Weather Act, started mapping in, and this partnership. When the pie gets bigger, everybody excels, and that's what's happened here in the United States. So I get worried with this idea about things can be replaced by the private. The Weather Service has private sector support in every stage of the value chain, every stage. And in this country, and it's the other thing other countries can't fathom is that, media folks can do their own forecast and warnings. Now, again, remember, I get back to that consistency thing. So there's more collaboration now because people understand that information to public safety officials is really important and it's more important if it's consistent. So there's a collaboration going on, and the chats, and there's all this kind of stuff going on. We have this in this country. We shouldn't lose. I hope we don't lose it, because it really is a workable way of moving forward. And it actually enhances the Weather Service ability to actually meet its mission of saving lives and property. So I'm a big fan of this partnership, and I think it's the way to go. And we should work and battle to sustain it because it really has proved to be the optimal way of moving forward in the whole world.
Thanks, Louie, and thanks, Mary. Brad, you have your hand up. I'll give you a couple of seconds here as we're wrapping up. We've got some great questions and topics, and one strikes dear to my heart where the person asked the question in all caps, which, having worked in the Weather Service, it's nostalgic seeing all caps. Brad, you're on mute.
Just real quick and really underscoring what Mary and Louis have already said. What we have in the U.S., a really strong and balanced enterprise, I really truly believe is the best solution. And I hope, and reflecting back on Apollo 13, sort of when you have a crisis and destabilization and problem solving, you hope that, and people pull together, and humans tend to do that. And I hope a weather enterprise tends to do that, and we work with each other and make sure we have each other's back, and that we continue to advocate for the best solution, which is a balanced and strong enterprise.
Great. Now we have 7 minutes remaining. We do want to be cognizant of the time. I see 3 really interesting topics in the Q&A there. One is on students being creative, looking for, making lemonade out of lemons, looking overseas for either their graduate program or to start their career. So one, just wanted to acknowledge that and see if anyone had thoughts on sort of students and again, being creative and taking advantage of opportunities. 2, going back to the all caps question, how do we get our arms around the data collection? A lot of data sets have gone offline from NOAA. Is the worst behind us? Is that just, what's to come? So there's the data side of things, there's the student side of things. And then maybe even to tie this into a bow, what can professional societies, here specifically AMS, what would you like AMS to do moving forward in all of this? So whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I can jump in on the student question. I was just reading through that, and certainly I don't think it's a bad thing. I agree with the author of that. I don't think it's a bad thing for students to pursue graduate education overseas, wherever. I've had so many students who have gone to Germany and have done some amazing work on things that even were outside atmospheric science. So, in the related areas, like looking at the movement of oil slicks in the North Sea and stuff like that. And they come back different. They come back more cultured and, just, different people and ready to sort of pursue the next step in their careers. And it's really exciting to see. But the point is, well taken, that is this going to lead to an overall loss of talent in the U.S.? I think right now we're still in a an uncertain state as to how it's all going to play out. And so I don't know the answer to that question. I think that it's probably going to be somewhat cyclic, that there will be a time whenever the students, that the opportunities will return. We don't know how it's going to play out over the next couple of years for this, but I think that the opportunities will return, and we'll see a different freshness in the research opportunities for graduate students in this country as well. But I can't see that far out yet. I do think in the short term we are going to lose some students.
Louis.
Yeah, this idea of we're in a trough now and it will rebound is something is fine for the students who have another 2 or 3 years in their study. There are students coming out now. I just would remind everyone we're the only group that does prediction for a living. And in the Weather Service, there are 11 service areas. It's not just severe weather. It's not just hurricanes. There's major prediction challenges in oceans, major prediction challenges in space weather, with a lot of resources going to space weather. Think Space Force, by the way. There are, look for the opportunities. If you had a dream about being in the Weather Service, as kids, I know I did, and probably Brad did. You always hear about this. I always wanted to be in the Weather Service. Well, when I was coming out of my bachelor's and at master's level, it was the early 70s. There was nothing but cuts being talked about to the Weather Service. It was a real downside. I kept on going to graduate school. The point is, it's, when you get back in, there's always a lot more opportunities, by the way. That's what I always say. But there's a lot of things to be done in the prediction arena for the whole societal, not just public safety, but the whole societal needs, and business and the financial markets, who write that they have to understand climate and weather and water to move forward. That's us. Okay. So keep on looking, keep on dreaming. I think you should be able to live your dreams, and there's a lot of work that's going to be done out there.
Great. Mary.
Yeah, real quick, I'm going to take the piece about professional societies and what they can do. And I think that I'll tell you a few things. One is our current president. I think Dave Stunsford is doing a great job. We've really been hitting the hill in educating people about the enterprise and all, so that's great. They've done a number of things with providing AMS benefits. I want to come back to the effort I'm involved in with Keith Sider, where we're working to deliver reports, targeted to the administration and to Congress on what are some potential thoughts about improving things there. The first report that's going to go out is just a baseline of where we were pre-January, just to have that baseline. And so that's where we can highlight really everything that's really been working in our enterprise. And then we're going to take on a series of reports. So this is all with Paul Higgins and Keith Sider in the policy program, but it's very open to comments and input from other people. Thank you.
And can I just add one thing on the data? I know of groups.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention their names, but there are a number of groups out there that are just focused on preserving data and securing data, and it involves people, from financial people and stuff like that are trying to cobble the resources together to do that. So I'm just letting people know that it's out there.
Yeah, and I think the National Academies is involved with that as well.
Right.
And Brad, any last thoughts?
Yeah, really quick. We didn't get to what I'm most worried about, but I'll really quickly. I worry about the loss of investments in science. We've talked a lot about operational issues today, and they're critical, and they also worry me a lot. But just the investments in science, because if you actually go as far as where the rumors and things suggest of closing labs or closing cooperative institutes, that's our seed corn, and the impact of that will be long lasting. And so I really hope that a greater wisdom will prevail and that we will maintain that capacity because it's so critical to our future that we invest in science.
No, great final comment. I'll just go full circle on emotion is that, everyone's passion for science, for meteorology, the atmospheric sciences, the social sciences, trying, to get a better outcome in these extreme events. It means everything. And, if we can put on an optimistic lens to the future, is that we do have some power collectively and individually to shape our world. So with that, thank you, Mary, Brad, Rich, and Louie, and thank you all for attending this conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Gideon.
Thanks everyone for sticking with us.
Thanks for your work, Doug. Appreciate it. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Gideon.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And yes, again, Brad, Mary, Louis, Rich, Doug, thank you for bringing this to the community this evening. Your insights are thoughtful and very important to hear for us at this point in time. And audience, for those of you tuning in, this webinar will be available soon at the AMS website. If you want to keep the conversation going, go ahead and head over to the AMS Open Forum. We'd love to hear what's on your mind. And with that being said, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us again, and we will see you next time. Take care.